Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the October meeting for the RC West Oversight Committee. My name is Christina Osborne. I work in Stakeholder Affairs. I'll be facilitating the meeting. We are recording the meeting, just so you know. It's going to be out on the Oversight Committee webpage. You can find the link to that page on the RC West webpage, and that's on the ISO website. We're going to make that recording available probably by the end of this week. Once I receive it from AT&T, I'll post it. That's also where you'll find the agendas for these meetings as well as the presentations. So this is the agenda. We do have Michelle Cathcart, the committee chair, and Steve Cobb, who is the vice chair, present in the room. Michelle's going to start us off with roll call, and then Tim Beach from RC West is going to provide an update on shadow ops with RC, and then Nancy Trayweek is going to talk about the RC to RC coordination. We have Li Xing Zhen here from ISO. She's going to talk about the operations and planning coordination procedure. And then we have an update on customer onboarding. Joanna Lai and Gina Wander will provide an update on the shadow ops, the post-onboarding transition, and then the Hana update. And then Ken Kasparian from Technology is here. He's going to provide an update on EMS. And then we'll go over what we want to talk about for the next meeting, which is in October. And then we'll have a time at the end for public comment, and we'll let you know when we're ready to take questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle.
All right, thanks, Christina. All right, let's go down the list. Arizona Electric Power Co-op. Avista. Avangrid. Is there anybody on the phone? We can just test so we can hear you.
Hi, Michelle. Tri-State, I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Keith. All right. Arizona Public Service. Bank.
Jim Travelers here for Bank.
All right. I'm here for Bonneville. California ISO BA.
I'm here, Larry Belknap.
Sanase. Chelan. Douglas. Grant. Gridforce. City and County of San Francisco, Hetch Hetchy. Idaho Power.
Ben Brandt.
Thanks, Ben. IID.
Matt Smeltzer's on.
Thanks, Matt. LADWP. Los Alamos. Modesto. Montana Alberta Tie Line. Nature.
This is Eamon Hoffman. I'm here for Nature.
Thank you. Northwestern. NV Energy. Pacificor. Pacific Gas and Electric. Portland General. Public Service Company of New Mexico. Puget. 7. Salt River.
Steve Cobb's here, and Michelle, we must have a lot of satisfied customers out there.
I think that must be true, Steve. Yeah. Southern California Edison.
Gary Tarpley and Tony Edison, I think we're both on.
Thanks, Gary. San Diego Gas and Electric. Seattle City Light. Silicon Valley. SMUD. Snohomish. Tacoma?
John Nuremberg.
Thanks, John. Trans-Bay Cable? Tri-State?
Keith Carmen.
Turlock? Valley Electric? And WAPA?
John Butler.
Thanks.
Rebecca Johnson. Michelle, this is Corey from Portland General. Bob Frost and I are both here.
Thanks, Corey.
This is
All right, did anybody else?
I'm also here.
Who was that?
Brad Kalbick from Avista.
All right, thanks, Brad. Did anybody else join?
This is Casey Hashimoto.
Hey, Casey.
This is Twana Blair from Arizona Public Service.
Thanks, Twana. Anyone else join? All right, looks like we're ready for RC operations. Is Tim? All right, so we'll have Nancy.
But that's okay. I'll give you a quick update, then he can fill in if I missed anything. So I'm Nancy Treyweek, Executive Director of System Operations. So for the RC update, we did have an RC EEA3 event pretty early, I think it was earlier this month, that we went through and handled. And then we started our shadow operations. We are evaluating, right now the way shadow operations is working as we're kind of evaluating everything. Peak is leading all phone calls. This is how it worked the last time as well. We're going through all our checklists, checking off all our data, making sure we have everything, and then as of October 1, we'll start taking the lead. Again, Peak will always be the RC of record, but we'll start, kind of leading those phone calls exactly the way we did it the first time around. So we're going through all that. That's working really well, and like I said, we're going through all our checklist items. And looks like we have a new operating guide that the working group came up with, and it's mitigating local and intra-area oscillations operating guide. I don't have much detail on that. When Tim comes here, we can ask him about that one, unless somebody else that was on the working group knows about it. Okay. So, like I said, when he gets here, we can talk more about shadow operations. But in general, it's going very well. No issues so far. Okay. Then the next item was my item, which was RC coordination. So we're still meeting about monthly. Once, usually it's a conference call, and every other month we meet in face-to-face. We've been working through, different aspects of sharing information. We've got data now being processed and getting over to SPP, the ICCP data they were looking for, as well as we're working with the other RCs to make sure that they're getting all their data from us. We received all the data that we need for our shadow operations and go live. In addition to that, the RC group has been working on shared principles documents for the WIT ECC and what we're calling shared in kind tools. I've posted 2 of those on the RC webpage, the Oversight Committee webpage. So if you're an Oversight Committee member, you can see those. I posted the WIT and the shared in kind tools. The ECC is very similar to WIT, and I'll go through that, but we're still working a little bit on the cost sharing piece of that. So I thought what I'd do today is kind of walk through what those documents at a high level entail. So all the principles documents, they're high-level documents of principles of sharing these tools. They're all going to be attached to an MOU, a common MOU, that all the RCs will sign, be an attachment to that. And then there will also be cost-sharing agreements with each RC. They'll be very similar, but they're going to be slightly different because, like in the case of AESO, they won't be using ECC, so that slightly changes their cost-sharing agreement. So, but for the most part, they'll be pretty similar. And right now we're working with AESO to work through that, and then we'll continue on with SPP and BCRC to get those all in place. So as far as the principles for the WIT and the ECC document, like I said, they are very, very similar. In fact, they're just almost identical, except for when it comes to some specifics around the specific tool. So they're similar in structure and content. They have specific information on each tool, and then they have these key areas or subjects. So one is an administrative section, and that really goes to talking about that the RCs that need to sign on to the MOU in order to share in these tools, as well as the cost-sharing agreement. And also it talks to the committee structure. The RCs want to form an RC executive committee. They'll be responsible for decisions, and I would expect it's probably the same committee that's been working on this for several months now, so we'll just continue that. I'm expecting we'll have one executive committee that will share all of these shared tools instead of 3, but each principles document talks about an executive committee, but we've already decided just to have one for efficiency perspective. And that there will be a charter, an executive committee charter that will be drafted and is underway. I'm just going to throw out a draft and let everybody comment on that. And then working groups. We already have an ECC working group. We expect that to either continue or to reform under a charter, as well as we have a WIT user group that we would expect to continue or form under this as well, that would incorporate all the BAs, TOPs, any users of any of these tools, so that everybody has input into the tools. We can move on to the next. So there's a vendor manager. The ISO will be the vendor manager for both the WIT and the ECC. That was decided 18 months ago or something like that. We are in contract with OATI. We're signing contracts with them. Really the role of the vendor manager is to just send the documents to OATI, get any cost back to that. The vendor manager will then share those costs with the committees of whatever information. So say you want a change to any of these tools, the team would, the working groups would write the requirements. ISO would just send that to OATI, get the cost back for that, we'd share that, and then the decision can be made whether we want to go forward. The group wants to go forward with those types of decisions. Also, the vendor manager would be the person that allocated the cost of OATI's management or subscription costs. We do have in there provisions around how change order requests will work. It's kind of a common good, is it for the common good type scenario and everybody shares, or is it something that a specific RC as an administrator really needs, but it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't benefit everybody, then the provision would be that that specific entity would pay for that, specifically as long as it doesn't harm anybody else. So there's some language around that as well. There's some business process, a section in here. It sounds like a lot. This document's only probably about 3 pages long. It was high level, but We do talk a little bit about the business processes and administration. In the WIT specifically, we have an administration procedure that's been drafted and has been socialized with the ISAs and all of that, and I expect the ECC group will do the same for that as well, probably pretty similar to that. We have a cost allocation section for the WIT. Everybody's in agreement that it would be net energy for load. For the ECC, we're requesting a cost causation. That's what our members are wanting to do, and we're still in discussions with that, specifically with SPP at this point on that. So that's why I didn't post the ECC document quite yet, but hopefully we'll get it posted and you'll see that it's very similar to the WIT. The tool, there's a section on, the roles of the working groups and the executive committee and the vendor manager and their roles. You can all see this as you read that document. So that's really for the WIT and the ECC. Like I said, they're almost identical except for specifics around the specific tools and, of course, the cost sharing. We worked on all these for months with the RC committee, which included all RCs, SPP, us, AESO, BC Hydro, and for quite a while, GridForce was involved as well. So they've all been hashed through, marked up many times, and we're kind of at the point, at least for those two, where we feel like it's in a place where now we can attach them to an MOU. So then we have a shared in kind principles document as well, because there's several tools that are under several categories that we felt we just needed to document as an RC group. And the ISO is hosting a few of those. We're hosting the Western Interconnection EMS full network model maintenance, and everybody will send us their model updates. We'll make sure that it all comes together and then post it out for everybody's use. So that was another thing that was agreed upon quite a while back, and we've been going down that process of pulling all that process together. We also will be the interconnection time monitor as well. And it was decided through the RC RC to RC group that instead of having multiple, we'll have one, and we agreed to take that on. Also, the ISO has some hosted tools for its customers specifically, and then one that other RCs are sharing. So our hosted tools are, we have a forecast data tool that people are bringing the forecasted data or sending it to us, and also our outage management tool. So we wanted to make sure that those things were in there, that everybody knew we were hosting these. And then we have a grid messaging system that we're using, as well as we're AESO and BC Hydro, or BCRC now, is also using the grid messaging tool, so we have that in there. And then we have the ones that WEC hosts, and it's really a process. WEC has a really good RAS database group. It's been going on for a long time and make really, a lot of stuff happens there, so that we expect to stay the way that it is today. And then we talked about individual RC applications and how everybody has their own advanced apps. They'll be using their own advanced apps. Nobody's sharing those advanced apps. So it's really just kind of documenting a lot of the discussion that we've had over the last several, year or more on all of this. So again, I posted this on the customer site, so you can go into the portal and look at least two of these. And our next step, I forgot the next step slide, so I'll say it here, is we're trying to get together a meeting with the legal side and the business side of the RCs to go through the MOU. We've had it out for quite a while for comment. We've received very minor comments. We've incorporated those comments, but we feel like it's important to get it out there again in a meeting, walk through it, make sure we're gathering everybody's feedback on that. So that's where we are now. Our hope was to have it all done by August 1st. I think we're past that. I really feel comfortable with the WIT and the Shared in Kind Principles tool. I think we're there with that. And I actually feel comfortable with the ECC principles. We have to work through this cost allocation piece, but the principles themselves, I think we all feel like there's agreement. Like I said, there's been many, many rounds of comments from the RC Executive Committee on those. So that's kind of my update as far as what's been at least happening at the the RC to RC committee that, certainly I've been involved in. Any questions on any of that?
Hey, Nancy, it's Keith Carmen at Tri-State.
Hi, Keith.
So I'm just curious, do you have a time frame on when we might be able to see the charter for this RC group you spoke about?
I can try to get it out, Keith, as soon as possible. I've been a little bit busy trying to get
no worries, understand.
Keith, let me just tell you that I'm modeling it, honestly, after the charter for this group. I thought that the charter for this group was pretty good, so it's pretty much modeled after that, and it shouldn't be too long, Keith. I'll try to get it out as soon as I can here, get through this week, and then I'll try to get something out to you guys.
That'd be great, because I'm participating in that EC work group, and we're trying to get our charter together, and we're trying to make sure we have alignment, and it's hard to do when we don't have, the parent organization charter.
I don't know if, I'll talk with Dee Dee. I thought he might have shared that with that group, but maybe not.
Now we have we have a template for the ECC of one, but not for
okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay, no worries. I'll get it out as soon as I can here, Keith. It'll probably be about a week.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
This is Gary Tarpley from SCE. A question about the EEA 3 event. Are you going to be sharing any of that in the future, any of these operational events?
Actually, Tim's here, so he could probably talk a little bit more to it than I could. So maybe we can back up and let Tim, talk a little bit more about RC operations. I kind of gave you a high-level view, but we'll let Tim talk a little bit more about it.
Thank you.
So the EA event, I'll speak generically. I won't call it the BA on it, but we did have an EA event here last month. The entity involved had lost a unit, put in reserve deficient. They dispatched the reserves to recover from that, to cover from the BCE. They expected the unit to be back. So they were in their 60-minute clock for recovering reserves. About 50 minutes in, they determined that the unit would not return to reestablish the reserves. So at that time, the RC actually gave them an operating instruction to shed load to recover the reserves within 60 minutes. So that's basically what happened. We haven't had a post-event analysis from the entity yet, but we expect that in the near future. So at a high level, that's what occurred.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a classic example of losing a unit and trying to get it back. And
yeah, it sounds like it.
Shadow ops, did you discuss shadow ops a little bit?
You have a lot more information.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
So we started shadow ops September 4th. It's been going very well. We've had the RCs are currently involved in doing quite a few data checks. They're looking at their RTC results and comparing it against peak and what we've seen at peak. Then we also are doing quite a bit of other activities related to shadow ops. For example, we're doing a lot of checking of the interpersonal communication, phone numbers, backup numbers, alternate numbers, and satellite phones. So we've been doing quite a bit of that, as well as the blast call testing. So that's been going on pretty well. We've got very good involvement in that, and we appreciate that. We have seen a fair number of messages on GMS that are duplicate, so the BAs and TOPs are making efforts to make sure that they're up to speed on their tool usage and stuff like that, so when we come RCA record, they'll be ready to go. One of the things that will be starting October 1st is, like we have in the Southwest, we have a conference call every morning at 0400. There is a desire from the Northwest utilities, or the northern half of our RC West footprint, to have a companion call to that. So what that's going to do is we're going to start that at 0300, so we can't hold the calls at the same time because we want the RCs to participate in both calls. But that call will take place, and it'll discuss what's coming up for the day, the major outages, if there's any RAS impacts, any concerns there might be within the area or the region as well. The other reason we do it at 0300 is we want to make sure that we go through the nightly outage review checks first. So anything that's determined or identified during the outage review process that's different from the OPA that's generated, that's noted, and we can share that during the call. So that's going to start October 1st, and I think we're looking forward to having that participation as well. The 0400 call has been going well. We've changed the format a little bit from what Peak does. So we talk a little bit more. We have specific items that we make sure we query on, and we talk about those. So we always make sure that the call is relevant, and it's just not everything's okay and everybody hangs up. So we're trying to make sure that that's going well too. On the RTWG side, we do have a new operating guide that's up for approval. It's Mitigating Local and Inter-Area Oscillations. So this is an RC operating guide. We worked very extensively with the Operations Engineering Group and then also BPA as well, and got their feedback on it because they've got quite a bit. This is one of the earlier guides that you'll see from an RC as far as dealing with oscillations. As you know, the Eastern Interconnection had an oscillation event in February. It's gotten a lot of attention. The RCs spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was going on. They didn't really have anything to direct them other than they had a tool that showed them there's an oscillation occurring. So they were talking about it, and finally the unit in Florida that was causing the problem took themselves out of line and mitigated the oscillation. But they spent a lot of time. It was felt all the way from Florida all the way up to the upper Midwest. And they saw their ties moving actually for it. So there's concern about that, and it's going to be a more relevant topic. One thing I didn't put on here, but is worthy of noting, is that we did approve a guideline or appendix to our mitigating SOLs, and that's for TOP and BA reporting of SL exceedances. So the standards required TOPs to report all SL exceedances, and the mitigation they did to solve it. But they didn't give a timeline for that. So there's a lot of questions coming back from the TOPs and BAs about, well, when should we report this, you know, and that type of thing. So we developed a guideline, went through a couple iterations and got some comments on it, took that feedback, and we approved that 3 weeks ago and attached it to our guide. So we're hoping that that gives some clarification to the issue. One of the guiding principles of that is we don't want a TOP to spend time notifying us immediately when we'd rather have them start mitigating it first and then call us. So unless they're in trouble or out of, they don't have mitigation they need to solve. So we'd like to get them started and then tell us what they're doing and so on and so forth. So we're also going to give them a little bit of time when we make an observation of a SOL exceedance in our TCA. We'll give them a chance to actually address it before we call them and then call them. And so we're going to wait for a couple RTCA scans and then contact them. Something very severe, we'd contact them right away if we saw an extreme overload. So we got some guidance around that, and I think it's going to, we hope it works very well for us. So, any other, take any questions on operations if you'd like. The next step in October 1st, we'll take the lead role in the calls with the TOPs and BAs, and Peak will go into the listening mode, so we'll take a step in responsibility at that time as well. So that's coming up. So looking forward to that.
So John Nirenberg, Tacoma Power.
Yeah.
So just listening to my trainers and dispatches, kind of this early shadow ops, there maybe was a little bit more expectation that we would behave like we'll act in real life. And so I guess as we come into the next phase here, that's something that kind of want to bring forward, that things have been a little bit loose, and we're trying to make sure that we're tightening up as we move forward into the next level of shadow ops, and kind of hoping that from the RC as well, that we would see more of that kind of through the tools and through the, you know, some stuff was coming in just as we were going live, right? Mm-hmm. And so we weren't quite ready, trained on it. Yeah. And then, you know, we were coming into shadow ops. Other things have still been kind of changing underneath this last month. Yeah. And so as clean as we can go into this next phase of shadow ops is what we would be looking for from Tacoma.
I definitely appreciate that. The first period, we've been trying to firm up a lot of procedures and clarity. There was some discussion about, well, from some of the BAs and TOPs, that they really want to go through 2 nightly review processes with their outages. So we gave them a little slack there, but definitely October 1st, we expect everybody to be acting and behaving like we're RC of record at that time. So it's going to be much more firm at that time. So we're not the RC of record. That's correct. Yeah. But all the processes, the nightly review, the conference calls, that type of thing, we're definitely expecting that to happen. So.
Yeah, I think there was also some environment things that were getting switched around. So kind of making sure that everybody inside the CAISO is aware of, okay, this team is expecting this behavior, and this. So getting kind of conflicting advice at times as to, which stage that we would be looking at, things like that.
Oh, the environments, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's going to get itself, worked through here.
I assume as much, but I feel like it's important to talk about it and say it, so that way we're kind of moving that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
So Li-Xing Jin is here, and she's going to talk about some off-planning coordination procedure. Dee she's here for Dee. Dee's out on an assignment that we sent him to. so I'll let you take it away, Li-Xing.
Thank you, Nancy. So good afternoon, everyone. Next up, I'm going to talk about the operations and the planning coordination procedures. So last December, the RC West, we worked with customers to create a task force. The name is Operation Planning Coordination Task Force. So it's a joint effort to create four operation procedures to address different NERC standards. The four procedures are RC 640, mainly for the transmission, the near-term planning assessment. This is related to NERC, the IL-17 requirement R3 and R4. RC 650, this is steady state and dynamic model validation. This is related to NERC standard MOD 33. So RC 660 is transmission relay loadability. This ties to the NERC standard PRC 023. And RC 670, this is disturbance monitoring and the reporting requirement process. This is mainly related to PRC 002. So all those procedures received approval from the RC Project Steering Committee. And the process defined in those procedures needs to be followed by the applicable entities within the RC footprint. This slide in the table here shows the relationship between the standard and the applicable entities. The IL-17, R3, and R4 applies to PC and TP. MOD 33, this applies to PC. PRC 023, this applies to PC, TO, GO, and DP. PRC 002 applies to TO and GO. RC West has received repeated questions from different entities with regarding to those approved procedures. So therefore, we propose to set up public outreach webinars to bring all the impacted entities on the same page. RC West has worked with WAC to get the contact information. WAC maintains a registered entity mapping database. So it's the mappings between BATOP to the TO, GO, GOP, and the TOP. The contact information there mainly comes from the corporate compliance team and the legal department in those entities. RC West would like to use those contact information as a basis to set up the webinar. And we also would like your help, to communicate this message to the entities in your corresponding operating areas, so that people are aware of those public webinars. So next slide mainly talks about the schedule. All those webinars will be hosted on Tuesdays, 1 to 2 Pacific time. October 8th, we are going to talk about the RC 640 transmission near-term planning assessment procedure. October 15th is RC 650. This is a steady state and dynamic system model validation procedure. And October 22nd, we are going to talk about the transmission relay loadability. This is RC 660. And October 29th is about the disturbance monitoring and the reporting requirement process. Any questions? Thank you.
So I think what we wanted to do was just give you a heads up those are coming. If you can just let your staffs know and make sure we have the right contact information as well. That would be really helpful. I think it would be helpful for everybody to understand, their impact or how they're going to be impacted.
Joanne, you ready? Good afternoon, everyone. Joanne Ally, if I haven't met you before, RC Onboarding Project Manager. And we can move on to the next slide. We've seen that a lot. Wanted to give a quick update. We've been following this chart along the way, and we're seeing a lot more complete, which is great. It looks like on the operating procedures, talking to Tricia, there were a few outstanding items, but it was pretty close to complete. Really what we're down, finishing up all of the preliminary testing in preparation for shadow ops. We're in shadow ops, actually about 33%, but it's probably just time-wise. And then really the bottom line where we're really pushing for right now is wrapping up the readiness checklists and finishing up getting all the executive statements in. So we're at about 50% there. It says 20%, but I updated that incorrectly. So we are at about 50% right now, which is great. I do want to point out a couple of things. In the readiness criteria the onboarding checklist, we are at about 96% complete. There's a couple of things that we know are outstanding that aren't expected. So the Western Data Sharing Pool, that is part of in the checklist. It's one that we're responsible for. That's expected to go in this week, so I'm not too worried about that one. That accounts for the other 4%. Additionally, we're valid. Most people have submitted the geo we've requested. I think we only have one outstanding. We need to get that in right away, but we're validating it. So while people submitted it, your checklist may be showing that you're complete. I'm still showing them as in progress until they've been validated. And then, of course, the executive statements. There's a few other scattering of things that are outstanding, and I'm reaching out to the team to see if we can get, like training, for instance. If some folks are saying they've got a few more training to do, no big deal. There are a few other deliverables we're just waiting to wrap up. So I'm reaching out to teams. I'm pressing a little bit, so they're probably getting more phone calls from me than they're used to. Okay. As we mentioned, the executive statement, I know Christina sent out the information so you can get that ready. We've got 50% in. And I know a few people have asked me where to send it. So just a reminder, rcwest-oc@kaiser.com. As we move on, one of the things we're working on now, you'll see out in the RC portal there's a lot of different working groups. We're zeroing in on that. Some will be phasing out. Some will roll into others. And it looks like we're adding a couple new ones as well. So that, Nancy mentioned the ECC and WIT working groups are new. So those are new, but the other ones are going to stick around. Clearly the onboarding one will roll off. There's a few others. And I just want to point out that additionally we have the technical user group that's added. So we're already aware of the Oversight Committee and the working groups, but now we'll be adding a technical user group. I highly recommend you begin attending those or have your technical people. These are really for your technical folks and your vendors
to be aware of changes that are going on and have an opportunity to ask questions for integration type work. And this week I'll be getting a transition plan out. We did one for shadow operations. We did one also for the July customers for shadow ops and then for production. We'll be having a similar one go out this week, and I'll be covering that in the Thursday meeting that we have each week. So I wanted to make sure that everyone's aware of that and and take a look at it. A lot of times we get questions from folks, and I just have to direct them back to the transition plan. And I know, it's coming out right before we start the work, but we have had previous versions out there, so if you're being curious, you always have the opportunity to go out and look at those. But it's going to be very similar. I know the outage submission, there's a lot of changes in that, so I highly recommend you take a look at that. And we'll be covering it in detail. And rather than doing slides, I'm going to cover actually the document itself so people are get more familiar with the document and what's in there. So hopefully it'll be a draft on Thursday with the final going out before October 1st. So a lot of different things will be covered in there. Some of the key ones I want to point out, like I said, the outage submissions, focus on that, the dates, when the applications will be available, when you're expected to submit, when you can get into the applications and things like that. So also it's got a lot of information about customer support, who to contact for what issues. Okay, and then pass this on to Gina for Hana.
One prior.
Oh, you skipped one. Okay, good, thanks. Forgot about that one. I just included these dates. We've talked about some of those as we've gone along, but wanted to put this out here, what's coming up, so people are aware. There's a lot happening still. So executive statements, for sure. We have Hana coming out. We have, as Tim mentioned, RC West taking more leadership role during shadow operations. We've got our NERC WEC visit coming up, so a lot happening in that first week of October. Then we get into a lot of things that are going to be covered in that transition plan, when you're expected to submit outages, gen load forecasts. As we did when we transitioned to shadow ops, we will close the stage environment again, and that's really for your protection. We close it because you have to do a transition and point everything to production. So if we close the stage environment and you've been submitting to stage and all of a sudden you get errors in that last week, you'll know that you didn't necessarily get that transition complete. So we do that for your own good. And then going into November, clearly that's when we become the RC of record. So, and we also have the Western Data Sharing Pool going out there, and a lot of folks have just submitted into our network model update. That goes in on 11/20. And then December 3rd is the peak shutdown. Any questions on the onboarding? Okay, I'll pass it on to Hana then. I mean, to Hana, to Gina for Hana. We call her Hana anymore.
Just change my name after this. Hi, I'm Gina Wander. You guys have heard from me before. I'm a senior client trainer here at California ISO RC West. So I have a couple of updates. Did we skip a slide? There's one, oh, I think one more. Yep, thanks. So the Hana availability update, I know people are probably curious what is happening. So right now, Hana, we are doing connectivity testing for study and visualization. We have a number of entities who have proved that they can at least go through the basic process of, loading a case, running a study, that sort of thing. We do have a couple entities who have some issues that we're trying to work through with our IT team, so we'll be working on that. The 14 of the 19 that have confirmed that they can at least log in. There are a couple entities I haven't heard from yet, so I'll keep reaching out to see, just to make sure they can at least get in. And then we're also just working through some of the normal you know, the normal fixes and stuff in terms of bringing a tool on board. So the availability, like I said, it's available now for testing. It's also available so people can start getting into their training development. I've been in touch regularly with a lot of the trainers, and people are in development at least with as much as they can. And then there is still the plan for the 10-1 production-like availability, and we'll start moving into production-like processes in terms of support. So I do have some documentation coming related to that as well. So if people are running into issues, what's the appropriate way to be routing those issues? You know, things like what's appropriate for city, what's appropriate for reaching out to our real-time desk, and that sort of thing. So that'll be coming. And then I encourage you guys to go back to organizations and encourage your personnel to start looking at things like ratings, because those can be things that can be submitted into the model updates. And, you know, those are data that's already in there, so you can at least be checking those types of things. Okay, next slide. So for the Hana training update, so I probably should ask you guys how the on-site training went, but from the evaluations, we had a lot of positive feedback. We had 77 attendees here on site across 10 different sessions, which were each one day. This was from a variety of organizations, so about 20 entities were represented over the course of those on-site trainings. This was a very hands-on scenario-based It was a very hands-on scenario-based training where we jumped into the study tool, we ran studies, and even for those who were signing up just for visualization, we got some insight into some of the displays that kind of tie back and forth between the two. The feedback on the tool and functionality, on the tool functionality itself, as well as general questions, we got a lot of great questions, so kudos to your organizations and the personnel who are representing you at the training. So we do have some follow-up in progress on some defects, certain enhancements that we're trying to get in there, as well as some process updates, and then we'll work on getting an FAQ to follow up from the training. And then I went ahead and already did post the training documents to the Hana Working Group site, so feel free to check it out. I know your trainers have been kind of in there and working with that material. And then for the training update on availability outside of that, so the how-to videos for Hana visualization, we did make 2 short videos which are now available in the RC portal on the training page. We're working on scheduling some webinars in October, because if you didn't already have enough to do in October, you have more to do. We are doing a makeup visualization session, so that one's not required or anything. It's just really an opportunity, because we did have some people who missed it inadvertently, and so we'll just offer that makeup session for visualization to all organizations. And then we'll be doing a study follow-up session that'll focus a little more on the study functionality. We did have quite a number of engineers attend and had some more advanced questions, if you will. So it was a little bit outside of the real-time scope, and so we want to make sure we get their questions answered in that session. We're still working on the user guide, so the draft is out there in your trainer's hands, but we won't post it until we feel comfortable that we have it a little bit closer to be ready. And then we'll work on the study how-to videos as well, so those are still in progress. Before I move on to the working group, are there any questions as it relates to Hana training and availability?
Shazad with TFNV Energy. I second that availability is an issue. Right now we're still working through this. We can see it, but cannot run certain studies and whatnot. With the November 1 deadline coming in fairly quickly, and the training is only useful when you can apply it. So yeah, training is great. We've done it, but if we can't practice it going into November 1, I think there is a concern, and there has to be a little bit of sense of urgency to get those studies up and running for all 19 or whatever number of entities exist.
Yeah, absolutely. So to comment on that, so it should be available 10-1 with your number of users. So if you signed up for the default package of Hana Study, you should have all 4 users by October 1st, and you should be able to get through the process at least. So I recommend that if you have folks who are having trouble with getting through a study, even let's say regardless of your area, but just being able to actually run the process, please have them reach out. I have been sending regular updates to the folks who attended the on-site training. Please make sure that they get back to me, and I kind of send out like a checklist. There are a couple entities who I still haven't heard from, so please reach out to me, and we'll try to work through those issues for sure. We want to make sure it's ready to go. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. So for the Hana working group, we are going to be transitioning that to more of a Hana visualization and study focus. And so with that comes a transition of the user group into more of a subscriber user base. For the folks who are using Hana base, we obviously want you guys to get any updates that are applicable. This will be more similar to our current production process, if you will. So you should expect to get, if you're in Hana base, that you would get those updates via the real-time working group or, you know, a message out like we would with our other applications. So we'll be working to transition that Hana working group more for the visualization and study focus, just because there are some just slightly different impacts with that. The regular topics and the frequency are still to be determined, so more to come on that, but I just want to give you a heads up. Thanks.
Thanks, Gina. Looks like the next we have an update on technology with Ken Kasparian.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ken Kasparian. I'm a manager in the program office. Give a quick update from a technology side. Now we've finished up the DB92 promotion. That went into production on 9/19, and the teams have now shifted their focus and working on DB93. And the next slide is on EMS transition. So we've been doing a lot of work. Getting ready. We finished up our certification review, got the clear from the auditors. The last item we've got is just to let them know once it's in production. And then we've completed a number of things around readiness. We've got the operation readiness and training have gone, validation of the custom and one-line displays, validation of the limits and monitoring, configuration and migration of the ICCP points, and we've done 6 mini cutovers, and then we've got another one scheduled for tonight, and we've got our support plans all in place. So we are on track, still targeting for going live tomorrow. Any questions? Great, thank you.
All right, well, I guess we're pretty far ahead of schedule here. So we're on future agenda items for the public session. So our next public session is a webinar only on October 23rd. I also noted that in my calendar, at least, I think we have an in-person meeting November 19th and a webinar December 17th. So we should probably talk at some point about whether we still want to keep that timeline. I figure we'll keep them on the calendar for now until we go through the larger go live, but it's something to keep in mind for us to talk about as we move forward. But looking specifically at October 23rd, which is about a week before the larger footprint go live, are there any specific topics other than the general updates that we've been getting that folks want to talk about at that meeting?
Do we need to talk about participation? Are we getting that quorum when we have a meeting?
You know, I was thinking about that, Jim, because I think, I mean, that was clear. I don't think we had a quorum today, and that's part of what I'm thinking about when I talk about whether we want to keep this frequency. And I know that it's probably a little hard to tell right now. But we can certainly see if there's a desire to cancel some of these meetings, we can do that.
it might be worthwhile to just find out, is the interest level still there for having a number of meetings? One thing we also talked about at one time is, do we continue to have a committee of the whole, or do we end up with representatives representing the segments, if you will, for lack of a better term? I'm just wondering whether we need to tee that up or not.
Yeah, you know, I think that's probably a good point. So we can get that on the agenda to start having some of that conversation.
I will say that I think we anticipated into 2020 that they'd go to quarterly meetings. So we kept them monthly because so much was happening. But, I mean, certainly it's a good discussion topic as we kind of wrap up this year and figure out what to do next year.
All right. Why don't we go into public comment?
Yeah.
Are there any public comments?
So anybody have a question in the audience? Or if you have a question, you're on the phone, you can enter the queue by pressing #2. And Michelle, let me know if anybody enters the queue, please.
We do have a question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hi, this is Chris McDermott from Chelan. I was just curious if we were going to talk about RTCA alarming via ICCP, or if that's going to be done at a later time.
You're ready to respond now. Follow-up question. I assume you mean if you are subscribing to Hana, or are you talking also if you are? Okay. Yeah. So we are.
I know that we're subscribing to Hana, so I don't know if only the people subscribing to Hana are going to get ICCP alarms via RTCA or not. But I know that we are, so I'll get some.
Yeah, so I believe that it will be for subscribers to get the ICCP links for the alarms. Currently, the one that I know is scoped in is if an entity like a TOP has a violation, show up, that there will be an ICCP alarm for that. I'm currently in discussion on trying to figure out which other alarms are in scope and which will need to be an enhancement request in the future. So more to come on that, but it is being talked about. I also don't have an ETA on that. They're getting through the EMS cutover, and the alarms are going to be coming from our EMS, so that's part of the timeline there.
Any other questions?
So when was this is Brad from Avista. I would point people to the Hana FAQ, which talks about what alarming was supposed to be configured.
Yeah, and we've received some additional feedback on what you guys currently receive via Peaks HAA if you're an HAA subscriber. So we just need to get some clarification on which ones are part of Hana and which ones may need to be an enhancement request in the future as well.
So I think I also heard a question of when the EMS cutover is, and I understand that's tomorrow. Any other questions or comments in the queue?
There are no additional questions in the queue.
All right. All right, I think at this time then we can close the public session. So we'll take maybe a 10-minute break before we go into the executive session?
Sure, yeah. I'm going to send a note out to all the members. So, Michelle, you can go ahead and disconnect the participant line and also turn off the recording. And folks, thank you. And if we have any members of the public in the room, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for joining, everyone. We are now going to disconnect.